everyone, welcome to today's session where in the continuation of the series Literary Terms and Figures of Speech, we are going to discuss these terms simile and metaphor, and in the later part of this discussion we will also discuss about the difference between these two. Let's begin with simile. As per its definition, a simile is a figure of speech in which two essentially dissimilar objects or concepts are expressly compared with one another through the use of like or as. In a single statement, it can be stated that a simile is a figure of speech in which two unlikely or unrelated objects are compared with the use of connecting words like or as. If you see its example, then it's on the screen. He is as thin as a rail. Now, in this example, he is compared to a rail. Literally, there is no comparison or similarity between he and rail. Rail is a thin pole. But by keeping these two dissimilar objects side by side in this statement is evoking an image of a man who is remarkably thin, because rail is a thin pole. So he is as thin as a rail is making sense in context of simile. Next is a statement by Eleanor Roosevelt which says, a woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets in hot water. Now, in this statement, Roosevelt is comparing women to a tea bag, or she has kept these two distinct objects or entities, not objects, these two entities side by side, a woman and a tea bag, in order to show, in order to describe that how women comes up in her full strength, in her complete strength in tough situation. And here I want to give you an alert that simile is not comparison. Simile is very much different from a simple comparison. The first example, if you see, excuse me, in the first example, she looks like you. This is just a simple comparison. But in the second statement, she smiles like the sun. Now, this statement is comparing a woman to a very different object, which is sun. So here is a simile. Here is not comparison. So I hope that you have got the difference between a simple comparison and a simile. She looks like you is a comparison, whereas she smiles like the sun is a simile. Now let's have an example from literature, and to show you a literary example, I have taken this excerpt from Christina Rossetti's poem A Birthday. In this poem you can see that Rossetti has compared the heart to a singing bird, to an apple tree, and to a rainbow shell. In the first example, my heart is like a singing bird, my heart is like an apple tree, my heart is like a rainbow shell. Now this she has done in order to describe, in order to show the joy, the peacefulness, the fullness of her heart. She has compared the heart to these objects or entities. So it is the simile works. The next one is metaphor, and if we see its definition, a metaphor is a figure of speech that compares two different things by saying that one thing is the other. Unlike similes, metaphors do not use words such as like or as to make comparisons. Now, this statement is itself very much self-explanatory, which is very clear that it doesn't use like or as, and without using like or as, one object is related to another unrelated object, or one object is compared to another unrelated object. Let's see this example. She was a rock star at our last business presentation. Now in this statement, it's very clear that the speaker here, the speaker is referring to this girl. Speaker is not referring to this girl to a rock star which falls from space. It should not be taken as a literal sense. In a literal sense, if we take it, then she is a rock star. That means she falls from space. She is the object falls from space. No. Or is she a musician who performs at a rock concert? No, because if we see the complete context, she was a rock star at our last business presentation, then we can make it sense, it gives a sense that the women or the lady has presented such a presentation. She has performed during her presentation, she has performed in such a way that she stood out like a rock star at concert. So this is the sense, or this is how metaphor works. Without the help of or without the use of connecting words like or as, there is a direct reference or direct referring to the one object to the other unrelated object. Now, after this definition, let's understand metaphor in a little more detail. If we see the anatomy or the way metaphor is structured, then metaphor can be broken down into two elements: a tanner and a vehicle. Now, what is this tanner? A tanner, if you see the screen, it is written there. The tanner is the thing a metaphor describes, which means, let's see this metaphorical statement. Love is a battlefield. Now here this word love is tanner, because what is tanner? The tanner is the thing a metaphor describes. And in this statement, what is being described? In this statement, love is being described as battlefield. Love is a battlefield. And what is vehicle? The vehicle is the thing to which the tanner is compared. Now love is being compared to battlefield. That means battlefield is vehicle here. And how metaphor operates? Metaphor operates in this way: when the key attributes of vehicle, in this case battlefield is the vehicle, and the key attributes of battlefield are being ascribed to the tanner, which is love. I will state this operation or this process in two way. At first I will speak in general terms. Like if I say that how metaphor operates by following or by borrowing the key attributes of vehicle and ascribing it to the tanner. Now in this specific case of this statement, love is a battlefield, in this case the key attributes of vehicle, battlefield, are being borrowed to and ascribed. Battlefield, what are the attributes of battlefield? Violent, brutal, life-threatening. And these attributes are being referred or being ascribed to love. Love is the tanner. So in order to highlight the violent, brutal and life-threatening attributes of love, the speaker or the writer has compared, metaphorically compared it to love to battlefield. I hope you have got this process. Love is the battlefield, where love is the tanner and battlefield is the vehicle. And if we see any literary example, then this is perhaps one of the most famous examples of metaphor in all of English literature. This statement is from famous play Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. This play is by Shakespeare, and this is a statement by Romeo when he says, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun." Now if we take its literal sense, then obviously Juliet is not the sun here, because if she is the sun, then Romeo would burn to death. Rather, the sense can be taken in this way, that Romeo is awed, or Romeo has become stunned by the beauty of Juliet, that for him Juliet is as radiant as sun. And in this sense, Romeo compared Juliet to the sun, where he says Juliet is the sun. So this is an example of metaphor. Now after these definitions of both these comparative tools, or both these figures of speech which are part of figurative language, we must also know the definitions, the broad and specific, both the definitions of metaphor. which has been given by Oxford Companion to English Language. There are two definitions displayed on the screen. The first one is more general, which says, if I say that the first definition says that under the broad spectrum of metaphor, what comes? All figures of speech that achieve their effect through association, comparison, and resemblance. Figures like antithesis, hyperbole, metonymy, and simile are all species of metaphor. Now, this is a broad term definition, and I would like to add that this term hyperbole we are going to discuss in the next session, and simile we have discussed already. So after this definition, we can say that simile is actually a subset of metaphor. And the second definition, if we pay attention, then this is more specific. It says, metaphor is a figure of speech which concisely compares two things by saying that one is the other, which we have studied now only. So these are the definition, and after these definition, let's have a quick look on the difference between these two. It becomes essential to differentiate between these two figures of speech, because both the terms are used to create meaning through comparison. So I hope that you have understood this first thing, that it is the first differentiation or the first difference between these two figures of speech, which is the use of like or as. And it is quite obvious that the first and very obvious or very evident difference between these two terms is the use of these connecting words like or as, where simile uses the words like or as, and on the other hand metaphor doesn't use this. So, and in other way, if we say that that how they operates in their operation, in their process, we can say in this same thing in the way that simile, in simile the comparison is more explicit than metaphor. In metaphor the comparison is implicit. For example, if you see on the screen, he is like a wolf. In this example, he is like a wolf. Or if the next statement, he is as hungry as a wolf. Now in these two statements, the thing A and the thing B, or he and wolf, are kept side by side. So here the comparison is more explicit rather than the metaphorical comparison which says he is a wolf, where metaphor is superimposed on the tenor, where metaphor is superimposed and it is just directly referred, he is a wolf. So in other way we can also say that simile comparison in simile is more explicit than metaphor. And this is the list in which I want to show you that how, as per our requirement, we can keep two dissimilar objects together and compare them and create different types of similes and metaphors. I am reading out it to you. Like in the first example, in metaphorical sense, I can say all the world's a stage. And if I want to say the same thing in simile, then all the world is like a stage. Second example, my heart is a lonely hunter. And in simile, my heart is like a lonely hunter. The last one, she was a wildfire of rage. And if you want to say it in simile, in the form of simile, then in her rage she was as deadly as a wildfire. And I encourage you to make this list longer by creating your own similes and metaphors, by keeping two dissimilar or unlike or unrelated objects together on the basis of their similar, any common characteristic which you want to highlight, which you want to emphasize. And this is how we can create or invent similes and metaphors. And on this note, I sum up this session. Thank you for listening.